Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome to newcomers, to the Facebook group and podcasts, and actually welcome to all our regulars as well, those of you that have been listening along with us over these past 71 episodes. But we love hearing the diverse reasons why teachers across the world are joining. So much deep and creative literacy work going on in schools. We love getting the comments that teachers or those that are subscribing to the podcast, which is free, reasons for joining that Facebook group. We've got one here. Hello, I have taught English from years 7 to 12 for 14 years. Thanks for creating this group. The podcasts are excellent. There is always more to learn, and I look forward to that learning. And so do we. We love that we know that there is a community of people listening in, and that you get to access that to take into the work that you're doing. And we hope to encourage and nourish and expand thinking as we are all on this learning journey, no matter where we are in how many years we've been teaching. I think that's what brings a lot of us to the profession, is that learning excites us. So we love having everyone along. If you're not a member of the Teacher's Toolkit Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. And welcome to this podcast called The 6+ Traits of Writing. And welcome to our co-host, Phil.
Thank you, Sharon. Good to be back.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Always love being in conversation on the air with you, as well as all the conversations that we have over meals and drives and all through the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that now we can record it.
Yes, yes. Imagine if we'd been recording all these years. How many episodes would we be up to?
Oh, countless.
Yes. Okay, so
what's the teaching struggle today with the 6+ traits of writing, Sharon?
Well, it's probably not the teaching struggle with those.
No.
It's the teaching struggle. Why are we bringing what's called the 6+ traits of writing, which is something that many people will have heard of, and this may be new to some of you. But we're bringing it to you today because so often we as teachers are wondering, so we're getting our students engaged in writing, and we're thinking, so what is it that effective writers do? What do they use? What are they doing to be effective? And so therefore, what are those traits that make effective writers? And I think, we're often thinking about, we know immediately, okay, good writers, will have correct conventions, or good writers are using great vocabulary, or good writers are, sometimes we might be saying, good writers have written a 5-paragraph persuasive argument, sometimes. But what are collectively all of those things that really are the traits, so the behaviours that writers are using.
Effective writers
are using, yeah. So traits really lets us get into, and we go back to the work of Brian Camborne, where he talks about it's not just what effective writers do, but it's what effective writers use. So the traits are like behaviours. And behaviours of effective writers, well, what is it that they're using? And so the 6+ traits that we're going to be talking about today, I think answer a lot of the questions around what are those traits and how can we use them? So if we know what they are, how can they be used to absolutely help us support, extend, grow our writers as we're teaching?
So how can our teaching improve?
Yes.
In this area? Yep.
And so how can our knowledge of that help us to improve the effectiveness of what our students use as writers? So it's about how can we help them not only know what they are, but how we can teach them how to use those. So this is a conversation frequently undertaken with teachers when I'm working in schools or at workshops, people saying, yeah, but what are the things? What are the behaviours? Actually, it's not often that question. More often it might come from, what's the structure that I need to teach for this writing? But this shifts it not just from structure, but to what are the behaviours of effective writers. So because that question comes up a lot, and because we know the difference it makes when we move from just structure into thinking, right, what are all the behaviours of effective writers, that all of a sudden we know as teachers what we can have eyes on, what we can be bringing to our students to help them use. Choose and use. We often talk about that. Choose and use. So in today's session, so we're really going to explore, well, what are the traits? Where do we start at getting better at teaching with those traits? How do we use them well? What should we avoid? How do we know we're getting better at using them? Not just us as teachers, but our writers getting better at using them. How do we plan well with them within the curriculum, and what are the curriculum links for that? And what are some of the good connecting tools and resources that we would recommend for those?
And we might just talk a little bit about where they came from.
Yes, absolutely. That's where we'll absolutely start. So, Education Northwest, which is an organisation based in the United States, and whose website, www.educationnorthwest.org, and we'll put that in the show notes. Their website has their updated and current work around the 6+ traits of writing. And so I'm just letting people know where they can go to find the first base of information around this. And so these have been developed over, to be quite honest, I don't know how many years, but they've been around for, I know of them, for the past, maybe getting close to 20 years, maybe more than that. What they were doing by developing the 6+ traits was to give a writing model of instruction and assessment to help teachers provide clear, consistent and evidence-based feedback on student writing. So if we were looking at what feedback are we giving to writers, then that should inform what we are teaching in the first place. So they came up initially with what they called the 6 traits of writing. And when you Google this, you'll see both of those things, 6 traits and the 6+ traits, or 6+1. So what are they? So the 6, we'll go with the 6 first. The 6 are 1, ideas. 2, organisation. 3, voice. 4, word choice. 5, sentence fluency. 6, conventions. And then in addition to that, so 6 plus 1, so 6 plus presentation. And so out of these 7, so these 6 plus traits of writing, Education Northwest have given insights into what that means, what all of those elements, all those behaviours that are within that, and that's, I just think this is so the key word, that traits is such an important word, because these aren't just things we do because this lesson or this activity or this piece is, we're going to practice one of those elements. These are about the behaviours, the traits, the behaviours, what we are using as a writer. So each of those traits then has detail around, what are the behaviours that we use within those, within each of those traits. I will make a connection before moving on to the Australian curriculum. So for those of you in Australia, our literacy learning progressions divides writing into the following categories. The first, there's kind of like a 3-part overriding category, and that's called creating texts. And within creating texts are crafting ideas, which is number 1 trait, ideas. So in the progressions, crafting ideas. In the 6 plus traits, it's called ideas. In the progressions, the second one is text forms and features. In the traits, that's number 2, organisation. In the progressions, the third point under, sort of the third category under creating text is vocabulary. In the 6 plus traits, number 4 is word choice. Then we move into, in the progressions, the literacy learning progressions, ACARA. The next one is grammar. If we want to align that to what is it in the 6 plus traits of writing, I'd put that with sentence fluency. Number 5 on their list, sentence fluency. Back to the progressions. The next one is punctuation. Where does that fit on the 6 plus traits of writing? Under number 6, conventions. Then back to ACARA, we have spelling. Where does that fit in the 6 plus traits? Conventions. Back to ACARA progressions, we have handwriting. Where does that one fit into the 6 plus traits? The 6 plus, presentation. And then there's one on the 6 plus traits that we haven't aligned to, and that's voice. And voice is one of those things, we all know when we're reading something that has voice, we know that piece has voice, and we know how important that is. And so the 6 plus traits brings that to us, and I think that's a critical element in enhancing, it's kind of the glue piece. That's kind of the piece that brings all of that together. So I think that's a really important behaviour or trait that is noticed on that list of the 6+ traits. And I think as teachers, that's what we want our writers to find, is their writing voice and their voice in what they're. So I suppose where might we link that to the Australian curriculum? I think it links to audience. And if we really know who we're writing for, so audience and purpose, if we really know that, and that's our place to really help our writers find voice.
Yes,
and write with voice.
I was actually going to bring up purpose and audience because I thought we haven't talked about that, and Misty talked about that in her podcast, that it's something we really need to develop in our lessons in writing, and really follow that purpose.
Yes. So whilst we look at progressions, we can see those correlations, the ACARA literacy progressions, but let's look fully at the Australian curriculum where it talks clearly in achievement standards, and it's talking clearly about writing to entertain and to inform and persuade. And when we're thinking about why we are writing and for whom we are writing, when we know we are writing for someone too, then we're going to write with voice. If we're writing for the sake of writing, it's very hard to put voice at the front of what we're doing.
And we just concentrate on structure. That's what Misty was saying too. It's just structure, and we're not worrying about that purpose and that voice. It's kind of just structure. It's not. There's no soul to it, is there?
No, that's the word.
Soul.
No soul, no heart, no purpose.
Yep.
So purpose and voice, I think they're the big correlation there.
And even in non-fiction.
Oh, even in. Absolutely in. Absolutely in. And in fact, I think the Australian curriculum also says it well when, because we know in published works, every author we read has voice, because that's what it is. It's, it's them bringing, we can read books and we go, oh, I so hear what they're saying. And we'll talk a little bit more about, well, what is actually voice and how do we get it? But in the Australian curriculum, in the achievement levels for each, through, I definitely know it's in the new curriculum, at year 7 and 8, and I have to be honest that I don't know past year 7 and 8 whether it's stated directly in the achievement levels, but I know up until then that it talks about students should be reading texts that serve as models for their own writing. And when I'm reading good models, I'm reading literature, and literature includes all text types, informational text, any text type, imaginative, that when we are reading, when we recognise that that's been written with voice, then that helps us also to know how we get voice, to notice how does that writer get voice, so that we know how we can use techniques and ideas, and more than anything, our own passion for the topic or for what we're writing about, for voice to come through.
So the big need for mentor texts.
Yes, yes. Can't do without them. And Brian Camborne will have said in his podcast that we cannot write. Writers can't be effective users of writing if they haven't been reading. And by reading, we mean good literature.
Or being read too.
Or being read too. Or being read too. Absolutely. So let's go exploring a little bit more around the 6+ traits. And I'm going to, we'll put this into the show notes as one of the resources that I can really highly recommend for teachers across primary and secondary. So Ruth Cullum, who's written a lot about the 6+ traits of writing, but her book, The Writing Thief, Using Mentor Texts to Teach the Craft of Writing, is an absolute goldmine, treasure trove, and most beautiful dip-in book in looking at different types of writing, but through using mentor texts to help our writers to notice these 6+ traits that they see in writing so that they can be thieving these behaviours and traits to bring to their writing. So it's not thieving words or ideas, it's thieving the behaviours and traits of writers.
Like capturing it.
Yes, yes. So through Ruth's work, I just want to talk through some of the what she talks about as the qualities, the key qualities for each of the 6+ traits of writing. And what's important what has been important for me as a teacher about using Ruth's work as a resource is that she gives really strong insights into the what is the action that we're going to take in each of these areas and why. How are we building a behaviour here, which is the action, but it's also the why. And I think that's often the missing piece in some of the resources. I'm not saying good resources. I just like how Ruth makes this really clear. For example, if we're looking, and let me take trait by trait and talk a little bit about each trait. Do you think that would does that organise it, do you think?
Yeah.
So what I haven't even said yet, and this will allow me to do that, is, so what do we mean by each of these traits? So ideas. Number 1, ideas. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean the piece's content. And then she says that there are 4 key qualities with ideas. So the first quality in ideas is finding a topic. And in finding a topic, what we're doing, the action that we're taking, is we're finding a clear central theme or a simple original storyline. Why? Because we want to find something that is memorable. So the idea, what are we finding? Oh, okay, let me pick an idea, pick anything because I just have to come up with something. Or I've been given the idea and I didn't have a choice in the idea. But here is that thing. Why do writers do that? Why do they choose what they choose? Because it's something that they want to bring to their readers that is memorable. So I just love the way that she talks about this, and she's got, through her book, she's got summary sections around all of these things. And it's her summary pieces, these key qualities where I go, oh my goodness, that's what I want to bring in my mini lesson. That's what I want. I don't want to just talk to my children, my students about, okay, you have to come up with an idea for your writing. No, I want you to come up with something. I want you to, what idea are you going to choose? What is going to be for your readers the idea that you're going to be able to create into something that stays with your reader, that because it's so memorable, it's going to stay in their memory because of it. Now, to me, that's just taking the behaviour to a whole new level. But what Ruth is revealing through all of these is actually exactly what the writer is thinking. That's why these are the traits. So, and then she says, and if a piece has got a title, then that title will capture the theme or storyline in an enticing way. So it's going to draw the reader in. So I really like how she helps me as a teacher to better understand each of these traits and what are the key ideas that I'm bringing here to my writers into what we're doing, what I'll be modelling, or what we're noticing. How does the writer make this memorable for us? Anyway, so in ideas, he talks about finding a topic, focusing the topic, developing the topic, using details. So they're all the key qualities of ideas. And for me as a teacher, when I'm teaching a whole lot of different things across the day, and I'm a secondary teacher teaching lots of different groups, for me to know what are the key qualities, the key pieces, the key, within, as a trait, good writers, choose their ideas, but they need to find them, focus them, develop them, and use details. And so I find that just so useful for my planning.
And if they can see that in a mentor text as well.
If they can see it in a mentor text, that then means that I just have to bring that to them, and they're going to be noticing lots of how different authors are doing that, so that it's not just a one thing that I do as teacher, it's what they get to notice. But I have to bring that behaviour to them. All these books that we're reading, every one of those writers has that behaviour where they've had to think through, all right, find my topic, focus the topic, develop the topic, use details.
And seeing it done in different ways by different authors gives the breadth of knowledge about this trait.
Yes, over time. So because I'm going to see, I don't have to know what every author does, in that area, but it means once I've been brought that information, I can go, so that's a behaviour of a writer. They have to do all that thinking. And I think, I know as a teacher, in my earliest teaching, I definitely wasn't bringing that to children. I wasn't bringing to them the behaviour, the thinking behaviour, the trait of, okay, I might have gone straight from find the topic and then, get writing. I wasn't. And these pieces, some of them are that before I begin, but they're part of the planning. They're part of the revising. Developing the topic doesn't just mean, okay, I planned it out, now develop it. That I develop it through revision. None of these things are just, planning, writing, publish. It's, what does the Australian curriculum say? Plan, draft. Actually, it does say plan, draft, publish. But I think the drafting piece, we sometimes think of that as maybe I'm just saying it because I often do that, or I did often do that. I got them drafting, but how much time am I giving them to using the behaviour of knowing how to revise? And I'm doing that in any of these traits. Revision is part of all of those things. So number 2 is organisation. So
just before we go into that, I was just going to ask, a bit of preparation might be to look at some of the mentor texts that you've been reading to the children and notice how the author's using those ideas so that you're a little bit more keyed up about it.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of good teacher resources out there around using mentor texts to craft, for writer's craft, because this is all crafting writing. These are part of the writer's craft is getting ideas.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good for us to expand our knowledge of those things so that we can then focus our students into looking closer and noticing more specific things around that.
In your mentor text.
Yes. Yeah. So say for this one, for example, focusing the topic. So the question we could be asking in the mini lesson is, let's notice how the writer focused the topic in this book or in this text. So that's not a question that would immediately come to mind necessarily for me. But as soon as I see a list like this, I go, okay, yes, absolutely. How did they focus the topic? How did the writer narrow a big idea into a reasonable and manageable and tight way of writing? How did they do that? Let's look at what they did, because that's what they were thinking as they were writing. So what do we see evidence of in their writing? So as soon as our writers are doing that for themselves, then they know the thinking that they can take into their own writing. And there's an important thing that the 6+ traits has done, 6+ writing traits, Education Northwest have done, is they've actually, when it said that this was for a model of instruction and assessment, they are well known for, and jump onto their website to see their updates, their regular updates about this, but they've developed rubrics against the 6+ traits of writing. So when we look at a rubric, if we've got these 6+ traits and we've got at year level for our students what it is that makes if we're assessing against grade level, so at grade level at this time of the year, what is it in each of those categories that we're looking for at year level achievement? And then, of course, if we do have a rubric and we go higher with that, so what's in addition to that we're going to see in this piece? But I really love the idea that even if we just have that one single point, what's called a 1-point rubric, we just have something next to each of those 6+ traits that says this is the trait and how it's being used, how we're using it, to affect. Not only do we know as teacher better what it is that we're bringing to our students, and so therefore what we can feed back to them. So as they're writing, as they're working independently, if we've had a mini lesson on these things and then they're working independently, we can feed back on these very things that we've been teaching. And I think just as importantly, if students actually have access to that rubric, even if it's a 1-point rubric, that they can feed back to themselves how effectively have they done that. so that the next time they're working on it, they can go, right, I want to find out a bit more about this because I want to do that more. I tried it today and I want to do that more effectively. So they aren't just, the 6+ traits aren't just a end of piece, let's check it off against the rubric. They really are the feedback tool as well, so that it's not just, and as I said, not just teacher giving feedback, but students giving each other feedback against the traits, or students feedbacking to themselves, so reflecting on themselves and saying, yeah, here's where I did that well, but okay, in this part I didn't do that so well, so that's where I want to work in revising this. I want to get, elevate that bit. So I think it provides a really strong and solid guide for us to across every year level. So on the Education Northwest website, they have a rubric set up for K to, I wanted to say K to 3, might be K to 2, and then the next rubric is year 3 to year 12. So it gives, but whenever I'm creating rubrics with teachers, what we do is we look at sort of like the generic rubric that's there, and then we go, what kind of writing are we doing? Let's have the Australian curriculum out, or whichever curriculum we are working against, and looking at the achievement standards and saying, okay, at our specific year level, what do we need to have in there? What's specific now to the year level and to this kind of writing that we're doing? Because if I've got a rubric for narrative, it's going to be a bit different than it will be for, some elements will be different if it's informational, or if it's if I want to have poetry in there and I want to have particular features. So, and
I know you're working with some teachers with rubrics quite often.
Yeah.
How do they find that work?
The developing them, do you mean?
Yeah, and helpful to them.
Every teacher has said, oh my goodness, like this really focuses, because if we develop the rubric at the beginning of a unit or before the unit, that writing unit is beginning, it really focuses. So we can look at, all right, for this for the writing that they've done, let's look at, against each of the 6+ traits, what are we noticing? And so what will we focus on in each of the traits for this next piece? So we are kind of using, a piece of writing as an assessment for what we're going to focus on, what are the elements that, or what are the features, or the key qualities of those elements that we can bring to our students in the next piece. Of course, at the end of a unit, that's an assessment of that learning. And so that rubric becomes really strong and tight. I will get back to your question because I realised I'm just going down the assessment track. And then, of course, assessment as learning, this feedbacking to selves and to each other, and from the, as teacher to them, that's really driving. So coming back to your question, teachers just say, yes, it gives me not only gives me a clear focus for teaching or noticing what we now need for this piece, but gives students such a clear picture of what it is that they are trying to achieve here. So teachers love, or the teachers that I've been working with have really loved knowing that each time they are having or creating a unit of writing, that previous rubric actually helps them in preparing for the next rubric. So that it's not creating a whole new thing every time, but they just all build on each other. And so it's like you've got a bank. You start getting this bank of rubrics that you have developed, and you can look back. So, one teacher who, developed her narrative rubric last year, she's got the same year level this year. She's looking at last year's rubric and saying, all right, I'm changing a few things, I'm adding a few things here based on what we've done, from this unit. Now I can add some more. So, but it's not a whole big changeover.
Oh.
It's once you start working with them, what teachers also love is that because it's the same 6+ things on each, 6+ traits on each rubric, that just means that they're the same things I'm thinking about for every.
And so each time you do them, you're deepening your understanding of those 6+ traits.
Yes, yes, as are children. And then you think, okay, so in a year they get to work and develop those 6+ traits for each piece of writing, and that they're going to come again, if a school is using the 6+ traits, then that means each year I am deepening my use of those traits year upon year upon year. So as a school, you've got consistency across those things that, well, we might say, are they the most important traits? Well, the research has really...
And they line up with the progressions.
Well, and because they so line up with the progressions, we actually know that the progressions were informed, or that the 6+ traits informed that work around that. So it's not like it's just something plucked from nowhere. There's a lot of research that's gone behind that, and I'm not saying that it's research only that brings those things, but this is because it's about classroom-based research, looking at, when we might say, what are the 6+ traits of writers? Every now and then, we'll hear someone say, well, that's for published writers, and we don't need, our students aren't necessarily going to become published writers. They are, that's the goal. What is the goal of writing?
To become published. To
be published, to have a voice, to communicate, this is real work.
Yep.
This is the real work.
Now, we've digressed a little bit, Sharon. We'll go to number 2.
Yes. There's a new story. We've digressed slightly. Yes, number 2. So in organisation, what is organisation? It's the internal structure of the piece. What are the key qualities of organisation? So creating the lead, using sequence and transition words, developing the body, and ending with a sense of resolution. So they're the internal structures of the piece, and both the Ruth Cullen talks about each of these key qualities in further detail, and I do have to reference that back to Education Northwest. They also outline each of these key qualities and give information about those. So this isn't Ruth's work alone. This is, in fact, on Education Northwest, the rubrics contain each of the 4 qualities. And so you might be looking at those on that website and going, that is a lot of information, and it is. Right? It's a lot of information. So then, I know I'm digressing slightly here, but I want to make the connections for people that if you Googled 6+ traits of writing rubrics, the internet is flooded with rubrics that teachers have created for those. I like, because there's such a sea of them, I like to be able to find like a core rubric that makes sense to me that I can work with and use all my teacher knowledge and really understand from what I'm noticing students doing to what I get onto that rubric and using the Australian curriculum or whichever curriculum you're using. I like to know that I have got all of those elements together. So if I wanted to make it a little more condensed and not have 4 categories under the 7 or the 6+ traits, then I've mentioned this author before, Laurie Jamison Rogge. She's got 2, and we'll put these in the show notes, 2 great books called Marvellous Mini Lessons for Teaching Beginning Writing, K-3, and Marvellous Mini Lessons for Teaching Intermediate Writing, grades 4 to 6. And in those books, she gives a really nice generic K-3 example in that book, and in the year 4 to 6 one, a generic intermediate example.
Excellent.
And when I'm working with teachers, they're the ones I begin with. We look at those and then we learn using the Australian curriculum and the achievement level and thinking about it this time of year that we are reporting on this or assessing on this, they're a really, really good, I've just found them a really great place to start. So I can, and that was my strategy for the bazillion rubrics out there. How could I, rather than just grabbing one and going, does this fit? But to actually, I have to create it based on my students, the type of writing we're doing, and, across the year level, what are the expectations, the achievement standards that I'm looking at. So, coming back from the diversion, I want to go on to voice. So I didn't talk much about the 4 organisational ones, that internal structure of the piece. But once again, both Education Northwest and Ruth Cullen give these really important reasons about, so what's the action of that and why do we do that? Even down to, I am going back to organisation now, but the one, ending with a sense of resolution. We can often say that to students, end with, or the language I often use it is, have a satisfying, is the end satisfying to the reader? And so here, just in the key quality of this one, the writer sums up his or her thinking in a natural, thoughtful and convincing way and has anticipated and answered any lingering questions, giving the reader a strong sense of closure. So there's all the why. Why do we end with a sense of resolution? So I always think it's so important to bring to our writers the why.
Yeah, the action they're going to take, but also the why.
Yes, yeah. So, it's going to be, the action is we're going to do it in a natural, thoughtful and a convincing way, but why? To answer lingering questions and giving the reader a strong sense of closure. So for each of these, so in Ruth's book, that for me is the real essence. She gets to that real essence of that. All right, voice. So what is voice? The tone and tenor of a piece. And once again, 4 categories: establishing a tone, conveying the purpose, creating a connection to the audience, and taking risks to create voice.
And once again, again, mentor text would help with the modelling of that.
Yes. And because these are those key qualities, in Ruth's book, whilst she's listing those, and Education Northwest are using those as, key qualities, she's then looking at all of those qualities with mentor text across different text types. But for me, that real essence is I know what action to take. I'm getting the why. Let's see through good literature, through good mentor text, how is the writer achieving that? So, for example, this week, Richard, Year 6s, has taken, they're looking at voice, and he's used the book The Day the Crayons Quit by Drew Daywalt to look at how does the writer convey purpose. So through each of those letters, with each of the crayons saying why they're about to quit, the students were able to use that as mentor text to really get clear about how purpose was being conveyed through that, and through what tone or tenor was each of the crayons working, so it was that, what point of view and how was that expressed, which they were able to chart up a whole lot of the ways in which tone and tenor were created in the piece. And then as they were giving their writing a try and trying to put tone and tenor in, they were immediately using a lot of those techniques to apply to their writing. So it became the mentor text did the work of bringing it, of letting us see tone and tenor. The students were able to rapidly notice tone and tenor in the piece. Richard was able to chart those up, and then that was a very short process then into, okay, now where in your piece can you add some of that tone and tenor, and how are you, and which of these strategies that Drew Daywalt used can you employ in your writing? So very quickly, but the power of the mentor text.
Yep.
And noticing, having our readers notice, to read like a writer, to notice what's the action that the writer has taken here, and what effect was it giving? Why were they doing that? How did they get that? So voice, I like that we're to get voice isn't just saying write with voice, but about establishing a tone, conveying the purpose, creating a connection to the audience, and taking risks to create voice. What does that one say? The writer expresses ideas in new ways, which make the piece interesting, original, and fresh. The writing sounds like the writer because of the particular use of words and phrases that have a just right effect. So we've really only gone through 3 of the
we probably don't need to go
6
through
plus,
all of
and
them.
I don't think we need to go through all of them. But let me maybe just sum up the remainder of them by just talking about what do each of those actually mean, the overriding piece. So what is word choice? Word choice is the vocabulary the writer uses to convey meaning and enlighten the reader. So I just love these definitions. That for me, they give real clarity to what that is. So we've got one side, ACARA literacy progressions, and one of our listings is vocabulary. We've got the 6 plus traits of writing. We've got word choice, and it says the vocabulary the writer uses to convey meaning and enlighten the reader. Now, to me, that just brings it to life, brings the soul, brings the heart. Why do we choose the words we choose?
And there's a kind of a link there to our podcast on keywords, Sharon, where we're noticing these words,
Yes.
and now we can use them in our own writing.
Yes, yes. I'm just looking down that list and thinking, how can I not just read out 4 key elements, 4 key qualities: using strong verbs, using striking words and phrases, using words that are specific and accurate, using language effectively. But I'll move on. Sentence fluency. What does that mean? The way words and phrases flow through the piece. What are the key qualities? Capturing smooth and rhythmic flow, crafting well-built sentences, varying sentence patterns, predicting the rules to create fluency. Like, don't each of these...
Fascinating.
Yes. Oh, I love that you've used that word. That's exactly what it is for me. It's all of a sudden, it changes it from, oh God, writing, it's so hard and it's so, what does it mean? I've got to get the right grammar. I've got to get it. Like, all of a sudden here, varying sentence patterns.
And seeing those varying patterns in a mentor text.
And seeing these things, noticing them. It's an absolute connection to it. Absolutely connected. Number 6, conventions. What are they? The mechanical correctness of the piece. Key qualities: checking spelling, using punctuation and indenting paragraphs, inserting capitalisation, applying grammar and usage. And last one, presentation. What is presentation? The physical appearance of the piece. What are the qualities? Applying handwriting skills, using word processing, using white space, and incorporating text features. So that's wasn't a very brief summary of 6+ writing traits, but I hope enough to kind of bring or to intrigue and to
bring wonder
and to see how the writing traits may be something that, if that hasn't been brought to you, is something new to you, to absolutely go exploring that bit further. And Education Key West, Northwest, where am I going there? Education Northwest brought us the 6+ writing traits. They'll have on their website, so you can access that freely, those traits and key qualities, just like we've done here. So you'll get more information about that, and that's free. Ruth Cullum's The Writing Thief is a great connector to the traits and mentor texts, and using mentor texts to notice and see what writers are doing to use those traits.
I must just remind listeners to keep an eye on Teachific, because resources will develop in the future for things we talk about in podcasts, and we might actually add those resources later to a show note. So just keep an eye out for them.
Yes, yeah.
And Sharon,
yes.
That's probably a good wrap up. And is there a book you'd like to talk about today?
Oh, do you know there is a book, because I know people might not be listening to this at the time of, it's only a couple of months away from the Children's Book Council of Australia, Children's Books of the Year being announced. I've got a shortlisted book here that no matter what time people are listening to this is a book that I think can really be brought to students. I just love this book. It's called Walking in Gagajoo Country, Exploring the Monsoon Forest. So we are, for those of you outside of Australia, this book is talking about one of our First Nations countries, and it's written by Diane Lucas, Ben Tyler and Emma Long, and it's taking us on a walk through the top end of Australia, so through Gagajoo country, through the monsoon forest. And I want to finish by reading just the first, it's only 3 pages of this book, but I am going to, the third page has got quite a bit on it, and I do want to read it fully because I want you don't see, it's a picture book. It is beautifully illustrated. Most of the page is illustration, and then we've got text in sort of like down the side quite often so that we can see the full splendour of the monsoon forest and the things that are being introduced to us on this walk through the monsoon forest. So let's go walking. So walking in Gagajoo country. When we go walking, we never know how long we will be, what we will hear and what we will see. We pack our bags with food and water, a billy and some matches to light a fire. We head off into the shady monsoon forest on the edge of the Billabong. I must just make a note here too that this book is now, we're going to be introduced to plants and animals and features of the monsoon country, and the Gagajoo word will be written in red, and then whatever it represents will be labelled. A close-up drawing of that appears with the English label. So I'm going to read it with the English label only because I want to be quite respectful and admit that I don't know the pronunciation of the Gagajoo language, so I'm going to read it in that way. But I want people to know that for each creature or feature that we're talking about, that there is the Gagajoo word for it. Look, there is a tree full of white bush apple. One just fell into the water, and there is short-necked turtle popping up to gulp the fruit. We scramble through the vines and find some white bush apple on the ground. They are soft and a little sour, but juicy and delicious. Willy Wagtail is calling out, warning us of something, maybe saltwater crocodile, or just having a good dance in the tree. What you saying, little bird? That old ceremony man, Gunbunnaker, told me. That bird tell you story to think about, maybe some trouble around you or a snake nearby. Ah, Kinga there. See the bubbles? Better not go in the water for white bush apple. And there's shining flycatcher sitting on her nest, and skink scurrying amongst the leaves. So this is a book with beautiful voice. It's taking us on the walk through monsoon country with First Nations people walking us there, naming things for us and giving us real insight into country. So beautifully illustrated, beautifully written, and so much to learn and understand about this incredible part of our world, and the monsoon forest.
And the link will be in the show notes to that book. So.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think that is the wrap for the day. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. We've loved seeing that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teacher's Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. you'll receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events, and ways to contact us. Thank you, Phil, and thank you to all of you, our listeners.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. All the
Bye.
best.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.